Your black women's charity dreams belong here, Zola? Julian Croft's venomous jab ignites Blackwood's Grand Hall, slashing at Zola Vance, a black woman radiant in a royal blue gown that flares like wildfire. The chandelier's glow wavers. Elites in tuxedos and shimmering dresses freeze, some sneering, others uneasy, craving her collapse. Zola's eyes, twin flames of defiance, scorch Julian, her silence a roaring blaze that rattles the room. He, arm entwined with Blair's cold grace, laughs, certain he's broken her. But the oak doors at the hall's end thunder open, admitting Kaelen Shaw, Zola's billionaire husband. What power will he wield to crush Julian's scorn? Will Zola's fire burn away their past? How will this night redefine their world? One ember sparks, ready to unleash an inferno. She's fooling the world with her black empowerment nonsense, Julian Croft's voice snarled through the sleek Manhattan penthouse, his fingers crumpling a Forbes magazine as he glared at Blair, her icy blonde hair catching the city's neon glow. The cover blazed with Zola Vance's face, her eyes fierce under the headline, Redefining Leadership, Innovate Forward's Global Impact. Julian tossed the magazine onto a glass table, its thud echoing like a challenge. She's playing the charity card, Blair, but I'll burn her down at Blackwood. Across the country, in a San Francisco office pulsing with ambition, Zola Vance leaned over a desk cluttered with reports and coffee mugs, her team's cheers still ringing from a $500 million deal with an international foundation. Innovate Forward, her nonprofit, had just secured funding to train another million women of color for global leadership roles. Screens around her flared with metrics. 1.5 million women empowered, $3 billion in education investments. Her royal blue blazer, tailored sharply, mirrored the gown she'd wear to Blackwood, a silent vow to stand unbowed. Yet as her assistant slid a cream-colored envelope across the desk, Blackwood Academy's gold-embossed seal glinting like a taunt, her breath caught. The past flickered, unbidden. Years ago, Julian's voice had cut deeper than any blade. Education for women? Wall Street doesn't care about your dreams, Zola, he'd sneered in their shared apartment, his cufflinks glinting as he adjusted his tie. Blair gets it. Power is money, not ideals. Zola had been a double major at Blackwood, sociology and global studies. Her passion for equity was dismissed as cute by Julian's Wall Street crowd. His indifference had eroded her. Each critique, her bold ideas, her natural curls, her unapologetic blackness, stoking a quiet fire she hadn't yet learned to wield. Their divorce was civil, a cold agreement, but his final words lingered. You'll fade, Zola. You're not built for the real world. Now that world was hers. Innovate Forward wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a revolution. Its programs reshaping boardrooms from Nairobi to New York. Yet the envelope burned in her hands, its weight heavier than paper. Blackwood was Julian's kingdom, a place where her voice had once been drowned by whispers of too much or not enough. Her fingers traced the seal, memories of classrooms where professors praised her intellect but mispronounced her name, of galas where Julian's friends offered backhanded compliments. You're so articulate for someone from your background. The fire in her chest flared, not with rage but with resolve. She didn't need to go. Her life was full, board meetings, speeches, and women whose lives she'd changed. But the invitation wasn't just a call to a reunion. It was a gauntlet, a dare to face the world that had tried to dim her light. Zola's phone buzzed, Kaelen Shaw's face lighting up the screen. Her husband, a billionaire investor whose quiet power moved markets, was her anchor. You've seen the Forbes piece? His voice rumbled through the video call, warm but edged with pride. You're not just right, Zola. You're rewriting the rules. Kalin wasn't like Julian. Where Julian craved the spotlight, Kalin wielded influence like a shadow, his wealth a tool, not a trophy. He'd funded Innovate Forward's early days, not out of pity, but belief, sitting in on her strategy sessions, listening to her vision of equity with a stillness that made her feel seen. Blackwood's not ready for you, he said now, his dark eyes steady. But go, show them the future you're building. Zola's lips curved, a spark igniting. She didn't want revenge. Revenge was too small. She wanted reclamation, to walk into Blackwood not as Julian's ex-wife, but as Zola Vance, the woman whose work commanded billions and changed lives. The envelope felt lighter now, not a burden, but a fuse. She'd attend, not to prove herself to Julian, but to claim the space she'd earned. Across Manhattan, Julian's smirk faded as Blair sipped her wine, her eyes narrowing. "She'll show up, Julian," Blair said, her voice smooth but sharp. "And she'll act like she's above us." Julian's jaw tightened. Zola's Forbes cover had shaken him, its glow exposing cracks in his carefully curated empire. He'd built his life on deals and dominance, but her success, her audacity to thrive without him, gnawed at him. "She's nothing," he muttered, but his fingers betrayed him, clenching the magazine's edge. "I'll make sure everyone at Blackwood knows it." Zola stood, her office's skyline view framing her like a portrait of power. She slid the invitation into her bag, her mind already racing to the gown she'd wear. A Ghanaian designer's creation, bold and unapologetic. She wasn't returning to Blackwood to beg for a seat at their table. She was coming to build her own, one that would eclipse theirs. The fire Julian had tried to snuff out years ago was now ablaze, and she'd let it burn bright enough to blind them all. "I'm not going to Blackwood to grovel, Kalin. I'm going to torch their stage." Zola Vance's voice crackled with defiance as she faced Kaelen Shaw across her San Francisco office, the city's skyline a mosaic of steel and ambition behind her. Her royal blue blazer, sharp as a blade, framed her like a warrior queen, her sleek black hair a banner of unapologetic strength. Kalin, his dark eyes glinting with quiet pride, leaned against her desk, his tailored suit a study in understated power. "Then let's make sure they feel the heat," he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. The cream-colored Blackwood invitation lay between them, no longer a taunt, but a fuse, ready to ignite. Zola had decided she wouldn't walk into Blackwood's gilded hall to beg for acceptance from Julian Croft's elitist crowd or prove her worth to the man who'd once dismissed her dreams as cute. She was going to reclaim her space, to stand as the architect of a global movement. Innovate Forward wasn't just her nonprofit. It was a revolution, empowering women of color to lead in boardrooms and parliaments, its impact measured in lives transformed and billions invested. But Blackwood was a battlefield, a place where her passion for equity had been mocked as too idealistic by professors and peers alike. Julian's voice echoed from years past, his words a cold wind. "You're wasting your brilliance on lost causes, Zola." She'd let him dim her then, softening her edges to fit his world. Never again. Kalen's hand grazed hers, grounding her. "You've already outgrown them," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "But they don't know it yet." Together they'd crafted a plan, not just to attend, but to dominate. $100 million donation to Blackwood's leadership program, tied to strict conditions, curricula focused on diversity, equity, and global impact, modeled on Innovate Forward's framework. It wasn't charity, it was a takeover, a way to etch Zola's vision into the institution that once tried to erase her. An email from a nervous board member had arrived that morning. "Ms. Vance, your guidance is reshaping our program." Kalin smirked, reading it over her shoulder. "They're sweating already." Zola's mind turned to her armor for the night, a gown by a Ghanaian designer, its royal blue fabric woven with threads of gold, a nod to her heritage and a declaration of her power. She'd wear it not to dazzle, but to command, her sleek hair a crown she'd refused to tame. Years ago, Julian had winced at her natural curls, murmuring, "They're a bit much for the gala, don't you think?" She'd straightened them then, each pass of the iron a surrender. Now every choice, her hair, her gown, her presence, was a rebellion, a flame kindled by the woman she'd become. Across the country, in Manhattan's glittering cage, Julian paced his penthouse, Blair lounging on a velvet sofa, her wine glass catching the city's pulse. "She'll come, Julian," Blair said, her voice a blade cloaked in silk. "And she'll try to steal your spotlight." Julian's jaw clenched, the Forbes cover still burning in his mind. Zola's success wasn't just a surprise, it was an affront, a crack in the empire he'd built on deals and charm. He'd spent years at Blackwood basking in its approval, his mergers celebrated as triumphs while Zola's ideas were dismissed as noble but naive. Now her name was on every philanthropist's lips, her nonprofit a global force. "She's a fraud," he spat, but his eyes betrayed doubt, flicking to the invitation on his desk. "I'll make sure Blackwood sees through her." Blair's smile was calculated. "Then make it public," she purred, leaning closer. "Show them she's still the dreamer who doesn't belong." Her words stoked Julian's resolve, his need to reassert dominance over the woman who dared to outshine him. He'd humiliate her, not with shouts, but with the sharp, polished cruelty he'd mastered. Blackwood was his stage, and Zola would be his foil, until she wasn't. Zola stood, her office a crucible of purpose. She opened a sketch of her gown on her tablet, its gold threads glinting like embers. "This isn't about Julian," she told Kalin, her voice steady but fierce. "It's about every woman I've lifted, every door I've opened." Kalin nodded, his silence a vow. He'd be there, not as her savior, but as her equal, his wealth and influence amplifying her fire. The donation was their weapon, a way to rewrite Blackwood's legacy. "They'll try to smile and clap," he said, a grin tugging at his lips, "but they'll choke on it when they see what you've built." As Zola packed the invitation, her fingers steady, she felt the weight of her past lift. Blackwood wasn't her prison anymore. It was her arena. She wasn't returning to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's sneers. She was coming to burn down their illusions, to show a world that had underestimated her what power truly looked like. The fire she'd once buried was now ablaze, and Blackwood would feel its heat. She strides in like she owns Blackwood's soul. Blair's whisper, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the hum of Blackwood's grand hall, her words dripping with venom as she leaned into Julian Croft. Zola Vance stepped through the arched doors, her royal blue gown, woven with Ghanaian gold threads, flaring like a flame in the chandelier's glow. Her sleek black hair, a defiant crown, caught every light, and her presence was a silent detonation, commanding the room without a word. The crowd of elites, tuxedos crisp, gowns shimmering, paused mid-sip, some smirking at the audacity of the woman they once overlooked, others shifting uneasily, sensing a shift in the air. Zola's eyes, twin embers of resolve, swept the hall, undaunted by the weight of their stares. Julian stood near the bar, his tailored suit a veneer of control, but his jaw tightened as whispers rippled. "Isn't that Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward woman?" Her nonprofit's name was on every philanthropist's lips, its mission to empower women of color in global leadership, a force reshaping power structures. Yet to Julian's Wall Street allies, she was still the dreamer who didn't belong. A former classmate, his tie loosened by bourbon, snorted, "Running a charity must pay peanuts, right?" Zola's lips curved, not in defense, but in quiet disdain, her silence louder than his jab. She moved forward, heels clicking like sparks on marble, each step a challenge to the world that had once tried to dim her. A board member, graying and flustered, intercepted her near a velvet-draped table. "Ms. Vance," he stammered, his bow tie askew, "your involvement with our leadership program is transformative." His deference, a nod to the $100 million donation Zola and Kalin had engineered, hung in the air like smoke, unnoticed by most but heavy with meaning. Zola nodded, her gaze steady, knowing the board's gratitude was less about admiration and more about survival. They'd agreed to her terms, diversity-focused curricula, equity mandates, because her influence left them no choice. She wasn't here to thank them. She was here to claim what was hers. Across the hall, Julian's eyes narrowed, his knuckles whitening around a champagne flute. Blair, in a silver gown that gleamed like ambition, leaned closer, her voice a low hiss. "She's acting like she runs this place. You can't let her steal your night." Julian's smirk was a mask, but inside, Zola's poise was a blade twisting in his pride. He'd ruled Blackwood's social scene years ago, his mergers celebrated while her ideas were dismissed as noble but impractical. Now her name carried weight he couldn't ignore. Forbes covers, global summits, whispers of her impact. "She's a fraud," he muttered, but his voice wavered, betraying the doubt gnawing at him. Blair's eyes glinted, calculating. Then prove it, Julian. Put her back in her place. Zola felt their stares, twin daggers from across the room, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced this before. Classmates who'd called her too passionate, professors who'd praised her mind but questioned her fit. She'd learned to navigate their world, smiling through their microaggressions. But tonight was different. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here to rewrite the rules. A young alum, her dress vibrant with African print, approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Ms. Vance, your work inspired my nonprofit," she said, voice trembling. "You showed us we don't have to shrink." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a quiet command. Julian watched, his composure fraying. The hall, once his kingdom, felt unsteady, its air thick with the heat of Zola's presence. He drained his flute, the champagne bitter. Blair's hand tightened on his arm, her smile a polished weapon. "She's turning heads," she whispered, her tone a mix of envy and strategy. "Do something, or she'll eclipse you." Julian nodded, his mind racing. He'd humiliate Zola, not with shouts, but with the sharp, public cruelty he'd perfected. She was a threat, not just to his ego, but to the world he'd built on charm and control. He stepped forward, ready to strike, his words already forming like embers, ready to ignite. Zola sensed the shift, the room's pulse quickening. She stood near a towering floral arrangement, its petals no match for the fire, in her stance. She wasn't here to answer Julian's taunts or Blair's schemes. She was here to claim a stage they couldn't fathom, one built on the lives she'd transformed. The board member lingered, offering pleasantries, but her focus was elsewhere, on the oak doors at the hall's end, where Kalin would soon enter. Their plan, a blaze carefully stoked, was about to erupt. She wasn't just attending a reunion, she was setting the stage for a reckoning, one that would leave Julian's world in ashes. "Still chasing your little black women's education fantasy, Zola? Innovate backward, is it?" Julian Croft's voice sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's glittering din, a polished blade of mockery aimed at Zola Vance. He stood, champagne flute raised, his tailored suit gleaming under the chandelier's fire, surrounded by a knot of Wall Street allies whose smirks mirrored his own. The crowd hushed, their eyes sharp with anticipation, locked on Zola, her royal blue gown a defiant flame against the hall's opulence. Blair, her silver dress catching light like a predator's glint, leaned into Julian, her whisper venomous. "Show her she's nothing here." Julian's smile was a weapon, honed by years of boardroom victories. But beneath it, a flicker of doubt betrayed him. Zola's presence, unyielding and radiant, was a spark he couldn't extinguish. Zola stood near the floral-draped stage, her sleek black hair a crown of defiance. Her gaze a molten arrow that pierced Julian's bravado. The room's pulse stuttered, split between those who laughed with Julian, old Blackwood elites, their privilege a shield, and those who shifted uneasy, sensing a storm. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her glass, whispering to a friend, "She's Zola Vance, the Innovate Forward leader." Zola's nonprofit, a global force empowering women of color in leadership, was no mere charity. It had shifted paradigms, channeling billions into education programs that reshaped power from Lagos to London. Yet Julian's crowd saw only a dreamer out of place. Julian stepped closer, his voice louder, dripping with condescension. "This hall isn't for your little charity stunts, Zola," he said, the words echoing like a gavel. "Stick to your fundraisers. Leave power to those who know it." The insult landed like a match in dry grass, igniting snickers from his allies. Blair's laugh, sharp and crystalline, cut through, her eyes glinting with triumph. She'd urged this moment, her whispers in Julian's ear a catalyst. Make her small again. To them, Zola's work, her mission to lift women like her, was a quaint hobby, irrelevant in their world of mergers and money. The crowd leaned in, some relishing the spectacle, others, younger, bolder, frowning, their faith in Zola's vision a quiet rebellion. Zola's smile didn't waver, but it sharpened, a blade of her own. She stood taller, her gown catching the light like a beacon, her silence a firestorm held in check. Every eye felt the weight of her presence, a woman who'd once dimmed herself for Julian's approval, now blazing with purpose. Years ago, his critiques had stung. "Your ideas are too loud, Zola," he'd murmured, dismissing her passion for equity as naive. She'd folded then, softening her voice, her dreams to fit his world. Now she was done bending. "You're wrong, Julian," she said, her voice low but lethal, cutting through the laughter like a spark through smoke. The room gasped, the air electric with her defiance. Julian's smirk faltered, his flute trembling in his hand. He'd expected her to shrink, to flee, as she had in their marriage's quiet battles. But Zola's eyes held no trace of that woman. They burned, unapologetic, as if she saw through his polished cruelty to the insecurity beneath. The Forbes cover, her name on global lips, her nonprofit's billions, they haunted him, a truth he couldn't outrun. He pressed on, voice rising. "You think your little programs matter? This is Blackwood, real power, not your fantasies." His allies chuckled, but the sound was thinner now, their confidence fraying as Zola stood unmoved. A board member, hovering nearby, adjusted his tie, sweat beading on his brow. He knew the truth. Zola's influence had forced Blackwood's hand, her $100 million donation a sword held over their legacy, demanding diversity and equity. His nervous glance flickered to the oak doors at the hall's end, as if sensing the storm about to break. The young alum stepped closer to Zola, her voice soft but firm. "Your work changed my life, Ms. Vance." Others nodded, a ripple of support that Julian didn't see. His focus locked on Zola, desperate to reclaim control. Blair's hand tightened on Julian's arm, her smile a mask of calculation. "Finish it," she hissed, sensing the crowd shift. Julian's eyes narrowed, his pride a fragile ember he couldn't let die. He opened his mouth, another barb ready, but Zola's gaze held him, a fire that burned hotter than his scorn. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence was a verdict, a promise that his world was about to crumble. The hall's air thickened, every breath heavy with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the crowd, the oak doors quivered, a low groan signaling Kaelen Shaw's approach. Zola's lips twitched, a spark of knowing. Julian's blade had struck, but hers was sharper, and the inferno was coming. "Your leadership program's reshaping the world, Zola." Kaelen Shaw's voice thundered as the oak doors of Blackwood's Grand Hall crashed open, his navy suit cutting through the chandelier's glow like a blade of midnight. Zola Vance stood unshaken, her royal blue gown a blazing ember in the room's stunned silence, her sleek black hair a defiant crown. A massive screen behind the stage flared to life, its bold white text searing the crowd. "Innovate Forward, 1.5 and 1 Women Empowered, 3B Education Impact." The elites, tuxedos stiff, gowns shimmering, gaped, their champagne flutes frozen midair. Some, the younger alums, erupted in applause. Others, Julian Croft's Wall Street cronies, exchanged uneasy glances, their smirks from moments ago dissolving like ash. Julian stood rooted, his face paling, the flute in his hand trembling as Kalen's presence, a billionaire titan whose wealth dwarfed their fortunes, shifted the room's gravity. Zola's eyes, twin flames of triumph, met Kalen's, a silent vow passing between them. He strode toward her, his steps deliberate, each one a spark igniting the hall's tension. "Your work's been endorsed by the United Nations," he said, loud enough for all to hear, his voice a low, resonant fire. "You're not just leading, Zola, you're rewriting history." The words landed like a torch in dry grass, burning away Julian's venomous taunt. "Innovate backward," that had echoed minutes before. Zola's smile, sharp and unyielding, was a blade of its own, slicing through the remnants of his scorn. She stepped forward, her voice clear, cutting. "My charity stunts just changed the game, Julian." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock rippling through silk and satin, her words a direct answer to his insult. Julian's jaw clenched, his eyes darting as if seeking an escape. Blair, her silver gown now a dull sheen, gripped his arm, her face a mask of forced composure. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride. But now the room tilted against them. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, shouted, Her programs transformed my company. Others joined, their cheers a rising flame, while Julian's allies shifted, their laughter replaced by murmurs of doubt. The board member who'd fawned over Zola earlier now stood at the stage's edge, his tie askew, voice trembling as he seized the microphone. Blackwood is honored to announce a $100 million donation, he stammered, establishing the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Mr. Kaelen Shaw. The hall erupted, gasps, applause, and whispers colliding like sparks in a storm. The screen flashed again, detailing Innovate Forward's impact, empowering women of color in global leadership. Zola stood center stage, her presence a beacon, not a plea for approval. She'd forced Blackwood's hand, her donation tied to demands for diversity curricula, a legacy that would outlast the hall's marble columns. Kalin stood beside her, not as a savior, but an amplifier, his hand grazing hers, a quiet signal. Your fire burns brightest. The crowd's applause swelled, but it was uneven. Some clapped out of awe, others out of obligation, their world upended by a woman they'd underestimated. Julian's flute slipped, champagne splashing his cuff. His eyes, once sharp with condescension, were hollow, his empire of charm crumbling. He'd mocked Zola's mission, called it a fantasy, but now her name was carved into Blackwood's future. Blair's smile froze, her fingers digging into his arm, her own ambition tarnished by his misstep. You didn't know, she hissed, her voice barely audible, a betrayal cloaked in silk. Julian opened his mouth, a retort forming, but it died as another alum called out, Zola's work is on every global stage. The words stung, each one a reminder of his blindness. Zola didn't gloat. Her gaze swept the room, steady, searing, a fire that needed no fuel. She'd come not to fight Julian, but to claim her truth, a truth now undeniable, projected in bold letters above her. The board member, sweating, continued, The Institute will champion Ms. Vance's vision, equity, leadership, change. The younger crowd roared, their phones already capturing the moment. One alum typing furiously, Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, on black excellence. Julian's allies turned away, their whispers now of damage control, their power slipping like smoke through their fingers. Kalen's presence, a quiet titan beside Zola, was a verdict. He didn't need to speak again. His entrance, his wealth, his belief in her had shifted the hall's axis. Zola nodded to the crowd, her silence louder than their applause, her gown catching the light like a flame that refused to dim. Julian stood, a shadow in his own kingdom, watching the woman he'd scorned become its center. The oak doors behind him stood open, their groan a fading echo, but the inferno Zola and Kalin had ignited was only beginning to burn. You picked the wrong side, Blair. A donor's curt dismissal sliced through the Blackwood Grand Hall's fading applause, his eyes cold as he brushed past Blair, her silver gown now a tarnished sheen in the chandelier's flicker. Zola Vance stood center stage, her royal blue gown a smoldering ember, her sleek black hair a defiant crown against the screen, still blazing with Innovate Forward's metrics. 1.5 M Women Empowered, 3B Education Impact. The crowd's cheers lingered, but the air was thick with a new tension. Julian Croft's empire of charm was crumbling, and Blair's calculated poise was cracking beside him. Julian's face, once sharp with condescension, was a mask of ash, his champagne flute forgotten, its contents staining the marble floor. Zola's gaze, a molten blade, met his for a fleeting moment, not with triumph, but with a verdict. You're irrelevant. The hall buzzed, a hive of whispers and shifting allegiances. Julian's Wall Street allies who'd laughed at his taunt, Innovate backward, moments before, now averted their eyes, their smirks replaced by nervous glances. A young alum, her African print dress vibrant, clutched her phone, her ex-post already gaining traction. Zola Vance just owned Blackwood, round black excellence. The words spread like wildfire, each retweet a spark igniting Julian's humiliation beyond the hall's gilded walls. Donors who'd once courted his deals drifted toward Zola, their handshakes eager, their voices low with awe. Ms. Vance, your institute will change everything. She nodded, her silence a fire that needed no fuel, her presence a beacon that outshone their flattery. Blair's fingers dug into Julian's arm, her smile a brittle facade. Fix this, she hissed, her voice a desperate ember beneath her polished exterior. She'd urged him to crush Zola, whispering venom to stoke his pride, but now her own ambition was singed by his misstep. She stepped toward a cluster of donors, her laugh forced, her gown catching light like a fading star. Julian was just joking earlier, she said, her voice too bright, too thin. The donor's reply was ice. You picked the wrong side, Blair. Her smile faltered, her eyes darting to Zola, who stood unmoved, a pillar of fire in a room that no longer belonged to them. Blair's world, built on proximity to power, was unraveling, her elegance no match for Zola's undeniable truth. Julian's breath hitched, his jaw clenching as he watched the crowd orbit Zola. He'd mocked her as a dreamer, a fraud, but the screen above, its numbers unassailable, proved her a titan. The Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, funded by Kaelen Shaw's $100 million, wasn't just a donation. It was a monument to her vision, one he'd dismissed as charity stunts. His allies, once loyal, now whispered of his blunder. He didn't know who he was messing with. A former classmate, now a tech entrepreneur, leaned toward another. Her programs are reshaping my boardroom. Julian's hand trembled, the weight of his mistake a flame licking at his pride. He opened his mouth, a weak defense forming, but the words died as Zola's gaze swept past him, dismissing him without effort. Kalin stood beside Zola, his navy suit a quiet contrast to her radiance, his presence a steady inferno amplifying hers. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His entrance had shifted the hall's axis, his wealth and belief in Zola, a verdict on Julian's irrelevance. The board member, still sweating, hovered nearby, murmuring to a colleague, "Her conditions, diversity, equity, are rewriting our curriculum." Zola's influence wasn't just personal, it was systemic, a fire burning through Blackwood's outdated foundations. A young woman, inspired by Zola's work, approached, her voice trembling. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I can lead without shrinking." Zola's smile softened, a spark of connection. "Keep rising," she said, her words a quiet command that echoed louder than the hall's applause. Julian's allies drifted further, their handshakes now offered to Kalin, their smiles forced. Blair's eyes narrowed, her composure fracturing as she realized her own status was tied to Julian's sinking ship. She tried again, approaching another donor, her voice saccharine. "We're thrilled for Blackwood's future." The donor turned away, muttering, "Align with winners next time." The rejection stung, a public wound that mirrored Julian's. He stood frozen, a shadow in a hall he once ruled, his pride reduced to cinders. Zola didn't look back. Her fire had burned brighter than his scorn, and the room knew it. The screen above flickered, its metrics a relentless reminder. Zola's work wasn't a dream, it was a revolution. The X post gained millions of views, its hashtag trending globally. Black excellence. Julian's name, once a badge of power, now trended for all the wrong reasons. Zola and Kalin stood as one, their silhouettes a promise of what was to come. The hall's chatter faded, but the fire they'd ignited burned on, ready to consume the last of Julian's world. "I turned their stage to ashes, Kalin." Zola Vance's voice, fierce and unbroken, cut through the hum of the car as she leaned back, her royal blue gown catching the city's neon pulse through the tinted windows. Kaelen Shaw, his navy suit still sharp as a blade, gripped her hand, his dark eyes glinting with a pride that burned hotter than the Blackwood Grand Hall's chandeliers. "You didn't just win, Zola," he said, his low rumble a spark to her fire. "You redefined their world." Their silhouettes, framed against San Francisco's starlit skyline, were a portrait of unyielding power, a testament to the inferno they'd ignited. The hall's gilded walls, Julian Croft's shattered pride, and Blair's crumbling ambition lay behind them, reduced to embers in the wake of Zola's triumph. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, the screen alight with notifications. The X post from the young alum, Zola Vance, just owned Blackwood. Black excellence had exploded. Millions of views pouring in, retweets spreading like wildfire across continents. Comments flooded, "She shut down Wall Street arrogance," and "Her institute's changing the game." The hashtag trended globally, a digital blaze that carried Zola's name from the hall to the world. She scrolled, her lips curving as she read a message from a young woman in Nairobi. "Your work gave me courage to lead." Zola's heart flared, not with pride but purpose. This wasn't about Julian's defeat, it was about the women she'd lifted, the futures she'd forged. Back in the hall, Julian stood alone, a shadow amidst the fading clatter of champagne flutes. His tailored suit, once a badge of dominance, hung heavy, stained with the champagne he'd spilled in his shock. The screen's metrics, 1.5 mm, women empowered, 3B education impact, still burned in his mind, a relentless reminder of Zola's power. His allies had scattered, their handshakes withdrawn, their whispers now of his misstep. He mocked her? She's untouchable. Blair had slipped away, her silver gown a ghost in the crowd, her final words to him a hiss. "You dragged us both down." Julian's jaw clenched, his pride a pile of ash. He'd thought Blackwood was his kingdom, but Zola had turned it into her arena, and he was the fool left standing in its ruins. Zola leaned against Kalin, the car's leather cool against her skin. "This wasn't revenge," she said, her voice steady but alive with fire. "It was for every woman told to shrink." Kalen's nod was silent, his hand a steady anchor. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool, not a crown. At Blackwood, his entrance had been a spark, his $100 million donation a flame. But it was Zola's vision, the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, that burned brightest. "They'll talk about tonight for years," he said, a grin tugging at his lips. "But you're just getting started." The city's lights streaked past, each one a star in Zola's constellation. She thought of the young alum, her African print dress vibrant, her words a vow, "You showed me I can lead." Zola's work wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was lives transformed, from boardrooms in Accra to classrooms in Chicago. The ex-post's reach grew, comments pouring in from women she'd never met. "I'm applying for your program. You're my hero." Each message was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola's fingers tightened around Kalen's, her resolve a blaze that no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his penthouse, the city's glow mocking him through floor-to-ceiling windows. His phone was silent, his inbox empty of the usual deal offers. The ex-post had branded him a fool, his name trending alongside Zola's, but for all the wrong reasons. Donors he'd courted now praised her institute, their emails citing equity and envision, words he'd once scoffed at. Blair's absence stung, her social media dark, her ambitions severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn no match for the fire Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd buried him, her legacy a flame that would outlast his empire. Zola closed her eyes, the car's hum a rhythm to her thoughts. She saw the women her programs had lifted, mothers, students, leaders, each one a spark in her revolution. The Blackwood Hall, with its chandeliers and elites, was a fading memory, its power dwarfed by the world she was building. "They thought they could dim me," she murmured, her voice a quiet inferno. Kalen's hand squeezed hers, his silence a promise. "You're unstoppable." The ex-post's glow lit her screen, its reach a testament to her fire. She wasn't just leaving Blackwood behind. She was lighting a path forward, one that would burn brighter than any hall could contain. "Leadership means lifting all, and I'm here to ensure it." Zola Vance's voice rang clear across the Zola Vance Institute for Leadership and Equity, its sleek halls alive with the hum of ambition. The Blackwood campus, once a gilded cage of exclusion, now pulsed with purpose, its walls lined with screens flashing Innovate Forward's metrics, 1.5 M women empowered, 3B education impact. Her royal blue dress, a nod to the gown that had blazed at the reunion, shimmered under the Institute's skylights, her sleek black hair a crown of unwavering resolve. The audience, global leaders, students, and educators, hung on her words, their applause a rising flame. Zola stood not as a guest in their world, but as its architect, her vision of equity and leadership etched into every corner of this new legacy. The Institute's opening marked a triumph far beyond the Blackwood Grand Hall's fleeting drama. That night when Julian Croft's scorn had met Kaelen Shaw's thunderous entrance, it had been a spark. This was the inferno. Zola's speech wove a vision of a world where women of color led without apology, their voices amplified by programs she'd built from the ashes of doubt. A young woman, her braids vibrant against her blazer, approached after the speech, eyes gleaming with fire. "Ms. Vance, you showed me I don't have to shrink," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'm leading a startup now because of your programs." Zola's smile, warm yet unyielding, was a spark passed forward. "Keep burning bright," she said, her words a vow that echoed through the hall. Kalin stood at the crowd's edge, his navy suit a quiet contrast to the room's energy, his pride a steady ember. He'd never sought the spotlight, his billionaire status a tool to amplify Zola's fire, not overshadow it. Their partnership, forged in shared purpose, had turned Blackwood's elitism into a platform for change. The Institute's curriculum, shaped by Innovate Forward's equity mandates, was training a new generation, women from Chicago to Accra, their leadership redefining boardrooms and governments. Kalen's gaze met Zola's, a silent promise. "Your light is unstoppable." She nodded, her heart a furnace of purpose, knowing this was only the beginning. Across the world, the X post from that reunion night still burned, its hashtag, Chakun, Black Excellence, alive with millions of voices. Messages poured in, a teacher in Lagos inspired to start a leadership program, a student in Harlem applying to the Institute, a CEO in London citing Zola's work in her keynote. Each was a spark, kindling a movement that Julian's world could never contain. Zola scrolled through her phone backstage, her lips curving as she read a comment. Zola Vance didn't just win, she changed the game. The reunion's echoes had faded, but its fire had spread, a global blaze no one could extinguish. In Manhattan, Julian sat in his dim penthouse, the city's skyline a cold mockery through his windows. His phone was silent, his once buzzing network reduced to whispers of his blunder. The X post had branded him a relic, his name a cautionary tale beside Zola's rising star. Donors who'd once flocked to him now funded her institute, their emails praising equity and vision, words he'd mocked as naive. Blair was gone, her social media silent, her ambition severed by his failure. He poured a whiskey, its burn hollow compared to the inferno Zola had unleashed. He'd thought he could bury her, but she'd built a legacy that buried him, its flames outlasting his fated empire. Zola walked the Institute's halls, her heels clicking like sparks on marble. Portraits of women she'd mentored lined the walls, leaders, educators, changemakers, each a testament to her revolution. She paused at a screen displaying a new metric, 2M Women Empowered. Her work wasn't numbers, it was lives, stories, futures. The young woman's words echoed in her mind. "I don't have to shrink." Zola had once folded herself to fit Julian's world, her dreams dimmed by his scorn. Now she stood unbowed, her fire a beacon for those who'd been told to fade. The audience lingered, their chatter a hum of possibility. A professor approached, her voice reverent. "Your institute is reshaping how we teach leadership." Zola nodded, her gaze steady. "It's not about leading alone," she said. "It's about lifting others." Her words, simple yet searing, carried the weight of her journey, from Blackwood's sneers to this moment, where her name was a movement. The X-Post's glow still lit her phone, its reach a reminder. Her fire had sparked a global blaze. Kalin joined her, his hand grazing hers, a quiet anchor. "You've built something eternal," he said, his voice low but fierce. Zola's eyes burned with purpose, not pride. She wasn't here to bask, she was here to forge. The Institute was her legacy, but its true power lay in the women it would lift, the worlds it would reshape. As she stepped into the hall's light, her silhouette was aflame, unquenchable, undeniable, a fire that would burn for generations. Thank you for walking with Zola Vance through her blazing triumph, from Julian's scorn to a legacy that reshapes the world. Her fire sparks a question. Have you ever risen above doubt to claim your space? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters. We're grateful for your journey with us and look forward to sharing more stories that inspire. Until next time, keep burning bright.